I received a comment on my video, Autistic Diagnosis and Knowing Thyself, Reflection on the Spectrum number 2, that has inspired me to make this video in direct response to that person, as well as everyone else that can and will resonate with it and benefit from it. And while I don't say in every video, like, follow, subscribe, leave a comment, etc., I would encourage you, if you are so led, to comment thoughts, questions, reflections on my videos so that I know where my audience is at and can kind of help me navigate and steer the ship for future content along with what I've already planned and am kind of interiorly guided to make anyway. This is going to be the most blatant blending of the two compartments of this channel that I've done so far. While all my videos can and should be, and I hope they are, relevant for anyone, no matter who you are, the neurodivergent / autistic conversation most definitely intertwines with my new and repurposed / recycled videos in the spiritual practice, spiritual journey, interior work conversation. The overlap should be obvious enough. However, I don't always bring them both into focus in the way that I'm going to here in answer and response to this comment / question. Which said, can't wait for you to share more about what to do when I come across a pathological or disorderly version of myself. Can't wait for you to share more about what to do when I come across a pathological or disorderly version of myself. I would encourage you to watch that video if you haven't already. You don't have to go watch it now first before you listen to the rest of this, but it would be helpful for context. So, Autistic Diagnosis and Knowing Thyself, Reflection on the Spectrum number 2. Because in that video, in that reflection, I laid out my perspective, my opinion, not using the DSM or other conventional criteria for what a pathological or disorderly or unhealthy expression of yourself or version of yourself or version of expression of yourself is. And I said that there are in all of the spiritual traditions. You could say all the religions, but unfortunately, they typically use these in legalistic and merely behavioristic ways. But I believe there is an authentic and interiorly transformational and universal reason for the kind of basic tenets, principles, moral codes that they espouse, that they lay out, that they convey, that they teach. And I have said elsewhere that I believe if you're getting going on a deep spiritual journey, not religious dogma and adherence, but really getting to know thyself and really looking at mindless, programmed conditioning, shedding the layers of who you are not to then discover and become who you are and who you're quote unquote meant to be, as well as transcending the constricted hyper focus over identification in the relative world and the relative sense of self, the Maya or illusion or matrix reality, if you will. Then when you get on the other side of that, I believe you need, and it is from my observation with former students, with people in the world, with others on so-called spiritual journeys that all of a sudden lost their mind, went off the deep end. It doesn't make sense. If you're on a deep spiritual transformative journey with the benevolence of God, presumably guided by your higher self, then why does it sometimes crash and burn? Why does it sometimes go so bad? Why are these sometimes the people that are laced with the most demons and scandal? There are reasons for that that I can go into at another time. I'd like to stay on track here with what I'm saying, but in general, it is important to have a set of practices, principles, and moral codes for when you get into those unbounded, untethered waters beyond that framework to keep you anchored and grounded. In the relative body mind persona self that is still here. When you transcend it, it still exists. And if it's not healthy and ordered and optimal and integral and integrated and balanced, and by the way, balance does not mean moderation necessarily. When somebody says balance, it doesn't just mean make sure not to have too much or too little of this or that sort of thing. It means balanced. Balance is balance. And really, if we get into it, everything is balanced already. Think about karma. everything is balanced. Everything is in equilibrium at all times, or working toward that, moving toward that automatically. But consciously working with balance in yourself. And preferring innately the positive, geared toward good, toward light, toward love. Navigation in your daily life. That, again, as I said in reflection on the spectrum number 2, is what all of the religions and the deep spiritual paths convey. And I believe in the more esoteric or contemplative or interior, directly experiential, non-religious, non-dogmatic, non-institutionalized, the purpose of those being laid out at the beginning, because when you think about it, I think it's the Four Noble Truth, the Eightfold Path, Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, the Ten Commandments, Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, and others are laid out more or less toward the beginning. So if you look at it chronologically and historically, there's a reason it's laid out there. But again, from the deeply mystical, contemplative, esoteric, interior perspective of these systems and traditions, it's laid out at the beginning because, well, like in the Zen tradition, there's a parable or a teaching about the ox herder, the wild ox herder, where at the beginning, you when you embark on the journey away from the city life and the marketplace, you go out into the wilderness to catch and tame the wild ox. I'm not well versed in it, but I've read it before, and it's a good one. So look that up somewhere. The ox herder, the parable of the ox herders, or the taming the wild ox, or something like that. I think you'll find it. Before you have your shit together, then everything is out of control. Everything is disorderly. Everything is pathological. Everything is mindless. Everything is a projection. Everything is driven by the ego and the pain body and separation. And you're not going to get all of that under wraps and under control merely behavioristically, but while you go on the journey of transformation through practices and true and deep healing work, it is a very good idea and one that I strongly suggest to set your sights every moment toward doing no harm to yourself or others. In the most broad, general summary of all of those tenets, principles, and moral codes, doing no harm to yourself or others. And I will save the conclusion for other videos on the more spiritual teaching side of things, and for you to see for yourself when you get there, if you are truly and genuinely taking up this journey. But for now, Suffice it to say, if you set up a life and a mindset that prioritizes being healthy, being balanced, being centered, being grounded, being kind, being loving, not selfish, not violent, then when you do find yourself in a disorderly or pathological moment, you're not then acting it out. So, in response to this comment, again, share more about what to do when I come across a pathological or disorderly version of myself. So, you already are tuned to knowing what a pathological or disorderly version of yourself feels like because you're going on this journey of knowing thyself, looking inside, and being really honest. And I believe that if we all do that truthfully and honestly, take it all the way in and all the way down, we come to the same conclusions, that those tenets, those principles, those practices, those moral codes is the inevitable outward expression. But rather than doing those things because it's a set of rules without any actual connection with them, you are finding that that is the truth and that is the best, most optimal, benevolent way of being for yourself and others. So, depending on the kind of load of trauma or trigger or emotional wounding, PTSD, mental illness, etc., that you're starting out with, then you might really have to put the clamps on yourself, put a seatbelt on, wear a harness, metaphorically, so that when you feel disorderly or pathological, it's not turning into a pathological or disorderly, harmful, hurtful, negative, dark, mindlessly reactive behavior. So that's the first step. But if you only do it behaviorally, because that's what you're supposed to do, without deeply healing the root of where and why and understanding the cause, resolving that, then it's going to be a continual battle with white knuckles and a lot of exhausting willpower. And while that's helpful as a first step, that is not the true and deep spiritual work. The true and deep spiritual work transforms from the inside so that what used to be a trigger no longer is. What used to cause you to mindlessly react no longer does. What used to bring up a very intense and uncomfortable emotion, it no longer arises. Simply is not there. So, in a very terse answer to this comment about what to do, because I see in a lot of neurodivergent autistic videos, there are kind of tips and tricks for what to do to avoid a meltdown, or what to do to get through a social setting, or what to do to avoid burnout, or what to do when you're dysregulated. It's very good to have kind of a protocol or a routine, a routine to help you get re-regulated when your routine is dysregulatedly thrown off. These are good ideas, but that is still just another way of saying follow the rules, obey the 10 commandments so you don't hurt yourself or others. But the trigger is still there, the tension is still there, the conflict is still there, the issue is still there, the root is still there. So as you're getting started, yes, most definitely that is a great first step. Is to kind of have a plan for, and I'm not sure what this person meant by when they come across a pathological or disorderly version of myself. So again, based on the kind of gauge that I'm laying out, the barometer, you know that it's pathological or disorderly because it doesn't feel right in your system, and the inevitable outcome is damage or harm to self or others, some kind of darkness. And these are not the same as autistic or just personality traits that are still challenging. There is a difference between challenging traits that you work with and challenging situations that you work with versus a disorderly, mindless, destructive expression of yourself, or version of an expression of yourself, or version of yourself altogether, called a subpersonality that I talk about elsewhere as well. So if this is referring to coming across one, you're not having to rely on the DSM or someone else to tell you that's disorderly, that's pathological, because as we know, some things that are conventionally touted as a disorder is simply not, like autism itself, autism spectrum disorder. I believe it's not a disorder. And what convention or the mainstream world says you should do is often from poor conditioning in the first place. So check out, or vice versa, what you shouldn't do is from poor conditioning in the first place. So this is about a very true and honest deep dive into yourself with these guiding practices and principles to come up with your truth. And again, just because something is your truth doesn't mean it is one universally true, or even a healthy and optimal and integrated and highly evolved expression of your truth if it's coming from an unresolved pathology or pain body or ego or separation or something like that. It's your truth for now, from this perspective for now, while you're still digging in to get to a deeper truth and a deeper truth and a clearer truth and a clearer truth. So if you come across one of those in your investigation, in your self-inquiry, then I provide tools. It's not the same as tips and tricks, because when you're in the moment of a reactive state, the terse and simple answer is it's too late. You just have to hold on for dear life onto your inner life raft to not drown and take others down with you. To use that analogy, if you've already become a very adept and self-assured and strong swimmer, then when you get on a boat and it capsizes, you're much more equipped to make it to shore and maybe even bring others, rescue them as well. But why would you get on a boat in the first place if you can't swim? Why would you get on a boat in the first place if you can't swim? That's going to make it, one, very difficult, and putting your own incapabilities on someone else to help you just in case. But it's also going to most definitely decrease your chances of getting out alive. So if you put yourself in a situation, which for some people is just every moment of every day, where there could be a strong emotional trigger or a mindless reaction or projection that's destructive and toward the negative and harmful to self or others, and you've not practiced and rooted in and established yourself in deeper sourcing and are working toward understanding, getting to know, looking at rather than ignoring, denying, suppressing, or being ashamed about what's really going on inside, then it's like getting on a boat not knowing how to swim. So my perspective is, yes, there are some things you can do if you're out and about in the world or just in your daily life at home and something comes up that is deeply troublesome, deeply bothersome, that typically causes a very disorderly and pathological version of yourself to show up. Like, remove yourself from the situation, take a few deep breaths, learn how to speak what you need and communicate clearly with those around you. Those kind of things, for sure, can work. But if the root is still there, then that's just going to repeat. And sometimes it reinforces it. Sometimes it keeps it there. So if you are doing introspection and self-inquiry and knowing thyself, and you come across a pattern that you want to look at, but you're otherwise in a very calm and relaxed, safe and comfortable, non-triggered state, then I have a whole curriculum in my other playlists and in the spiritual teaching work, but also in my support needs series. Go check that series out about how to set up your life in a way that supports your most optimal self. But that requires going on a journey to get to know who you are. It's not just setting up a trigger-free environment, a sterile environment that just avoids everything that bothers you. It's getting to know yourself and not actually needing anything outside of yourself. Being self-reliant as much as possible and setting up a supportive life for you. So check out my support needs series. That is more geared toward the neurodivergent autistic conversation, though everybody can glean from that as well. But the other playlists, like Dark Night series, Projection series, Foundational Teachings, Meditation, Contemplation, Deeper Cuts, etc., those are my repurposed videos from when I was a quote-unquote career spiritual teacher, yoga and meditation instructor, etc. And whether you're neurodivergent or not, the purpose there is establishing practices, perspective, perception of reality, identity, stability, groundedness, clarity. One, because it's just fun to do. But two, so that you can handle and discern and navigate and make decisions, choose from a place of freedom and responsibility. Freedom and responsibility, as we know, go hand in hand. The more of one, the more of the other is required. Well, definitely the more freedom, the more responsibility is required. I'm going to have to think about if that's vice versa or not. In any case, while you should have either figuratively or physically or both a kind of knapsack, because I've seen some autistic influencers recommend carrying a kind of just in case bag with noise canceling earplugs or fidget toys and things like that you might need when you go away from home. But home also can cause dysregulation and trigger. I'll also say dysregulation itself is not the same as trigger. Dysregulation is something to just kind of work with in the neurodivergent system. We're talking about pathological. Dysregulation is not pathological. Being annoyed at something because of sensory overload or getting thrown off of your routine a little bit and kind of agitated when the system itself is just mechanically reacting, and that's what it does. Through this work that I teach, you can most certainly quiet that a bit, but as you may have heard in my earlier videos talking about my own story and journey, once I healed mental illness, OCD, and all of my previous trauma, and for the most part, I would say in the 90, 95, 98 percentile, healed, and there was something left over that I knew was not something that still needed to be healed, but still created quite a bit of challenge, difficulty on day to day. Oh, and then I realized that's something called autism. That's something called neurodivergence. That's just this system. And sure, we can talk about like deep grooves. There are just deep grooves of neurology and patterning in the system that are just simply more deeply entrenched and are what they are. but doesn't necessarily mean it's some scar, samskara, trauma, PTSD thing that needs to still be uprooted, healed, and resolved. So in yourself, you have to decide what the difference is. But I'm laying out kind of framework for you to inquire for yourself. But so while you can kind of have a backup plan in yourself for what to do if you find yourself in a moment of near meltdown or in a moment of near burnout or in a moment of just reacting, just acting out, yelling at somebody, causing harm to self or other, being reckless, mindless, projecting, etc., then you have your favorite whatever it is to reach for and to go to calm down and not let it reach the surface, not let it crash on the shore, not let the tsunami get outside of yourself, to contain it. It's a good idea, whether these are interior practices or exterior tools. But my larger perspective, and why in that also other video called The Most Important Thing, it was one of the reflections on the spectrum, I forget which number now, called The Most Important Thing. This is the most important thing to me, whether neurodivergent or neurotypical or human or extraterrestrial, or doesn't matter who you are, what you are. This deep inner work that I do and teach and live by and practice, it's a perspective. It's a way of seeing and perceiving reality. It's not just about practices like yoga and meditation and journaling and fasting and things like that. Those are part of it, but it's a whole entire rewiring of the way you operate, the way you are connected to life itself and to yourself, and to others and to God. And I've laid out that path to do that. You can pick up hints of it in these reflections on the spectrum, but really the spiritual teachings playlists is where to go for that. So if you come across a pathological or disorderly version of yourself in your objective self-inquiry, that's great. Get to work investigating deeper and deeper into that. But if what this comment means, come across one as in you're just living your life and it's here, and it has fully taken over your system and is manifesting, my short answer to what to do when that happens is, unfortunately, it's too late to do anything except hold on for dear life to your life raft of not doing any harm to self or other until the moment passes, and continue working on what you need to work on so that that thing doesn't happen anymore. And that also doesn't necessarily mean continue exposing yourself to that trigger. So there's a fine line between set up a life where that trigger is just not there versus overexposure and assuming that if I'm just still in this situation, that is in fact itself pathological and not good, optimal, healthy for you, then the goal is to just put up with it and not be triggered by it. No, part of the call of the trigger might in fact be to reorient, reorganize, and set up your life differently, remove yourself from that situation, whatever it is. But that's not the same as suppressing the root cause of it. So you can remove yourself from the situation and at the same time get to work on the root so that another situation doesn't replace that one and you have the same situation again, just with a different costume. So in the moment, I've even tried it when I'm near meltdown or in a meltdown. It's too late to just go meditate, even though meditation is kind of my own life raft and has been over the years. When the system is already past the point of no return, even the most adept meditators can't really, or it's an incredibly excruciating uphill battle to bring yourself to sit still and focus to meditate. So the most adept meditators just meditate on a regular basis and have a consistent practice of these principles and perspective, perception shifts that then either prevent meltdowns altogether, because in fact, it's been, I'd say, 3 years since I even had a meltdown. For one, I can kind of see them coming far off, which means feel them rising in my system, like the first ripple before it becomes a wave, before it becomes a tsunami, to use the ocean analogy again. And am actually able to mentally shift. It's not like I need to go to another environment. It's like, okay, I felt that disturbance in the force, if you will. I felt that. I need to shift something in myself and or environment to not let it get to the next step and the next step and the next step. Very usually, not just meltdowns, but any sort of traumatic trigger, mindless reaction of that usually starts well before anyway. It was a decision you made or something you overlooked or something you didn't notice or something you could have caught before. It usually doesn't just appear randomly and spontaneously without a warning. So if you get to know your own signals, where it's coming from and why and what your patterns are, then you can, what's that word? The opposite of detonate. I think detonate isn't detonate when you like make it go off. What's the opposite of that? Where they undo the wires of a explosive device or disarm. Anyway, you can do that more and more easily and way back before it's too late, because there is a point of no return. So it's too late, in my opinion, once you're already in that full-blown state. That's why it's called practice. When you think about practice, for any of you sports fans out there, the classic Allen Iverson video about practice is hilarious, but is not actually the right way of approaching the example I'm giving now. It's just funny. Practice doesn't mean not as important as the game or not the real thing. Practice means going over and over and over and over, strengthening, training, rehearsing, so that when lights, camera, action comes on, so that when it's your turn on stage, or the competition or the challenge or the game or whatever it is arrives, then it's effortless. You do practice. There are some people in the spiritual world that don't like the word practice because it's always game time or something like that. But practice is actually very appropriate. You practice, and then eventually, and I think that comes from conditioning for people that don't that like have some sort of aversion to practice. Like they don't like homework, they don't like practice, they don't like drills, they don't like those kind of things. They just want to do the actual whatever it is. But eventually you start to love practice, and then you see that practice actually makes you really succeed when the moment arrives and is effortless. So that's why it's called practice. Spiritual practice, psychotherapy practice, spiritual practice, whatever they are, if they're deeply transformative and directly experiential and truly healing, and not just behavioral or adherence to something exterior, and you're actually strengthening your own ability, because that's another thing. While some pathologies and mental illnesses, we'll say, are buried under a huge karmic mound of rubble, there is still the light of awareness in there. And the mind is the mind is the mind. It's how I was able to heal OCD and mental illness and come off of dependence on medication, because I strengthened my interior capacities and my mental muscle. I strengthened my spirit. I strengthened my mind, body, soul, persona complex. Strengthen and heal the pathology. Strengthen the essence and heal the pathology. Heal the illness. And when you're not relying on someone else to do that for you, because if you're relying on someone else to do that for you, you don't know how to do it yourself, and you're dependent on that person, and also you don't become stronger in yourself. You're just getting something from over there, whether it's medication or therapy or healing arts or something like that, again, can have its place for a time, but to really teach yourself, because then you're relying on someone else to pull you to shore when the boat capsizes because you don't know how to swim. So there's still the light of awareness and the full untapped potential of your mind. If you are here, if you are alive, if you are aware, if you are listening to this, no matter how pathological or disorderly or fucked up or reactive or traumatized or trigger sensitive or destructive or harmful that you have been or are thinking about being or are in this moment, if you are listening to me, you have the ability to get started and to break free from that. But it does require commitment and consistency and work. Why shouldn't it? Why should it just be given for free? I mean, for free, yeah, for free. But it is a grace, but the trade-off is your commitment, and you receive the fruits of your labor. These are all the best metaphors we have for now. But you do have to do something. You do have to do something. You're not too far gone. It's not too late to get started at all. But in the moment, when it's happening, when you've not been in training, and then it's too late. Just don't hurt anybody or yourself. Be responsible. Be a good person. And then get to work so that that's a natural outflowing. So I don't care what you've been diagnosed with, what you've experienced in your past, what you've done in your life. The mind is the mind is the mind. And you are the light of the world. You have the light of awareness. You are what gives rise to the manifest world. Whether neurodivergent or neurotypical, whoever you are, whatever your current circumstance, it is not too late to get started. And that's what my channel is about. Support and what's that other word? I knew I shouldn't have gone down that that vocabulary road, because then I was going to have to pull it out. It's right there. I will post it below because it's going to come to me as soon as I press stop recording. Support, encouragement, resonance with anybody, in particular neurodivergent autistic people, but also a way out, tools, and a path for true healing, transformation, evolution of consciousness, enlightenment, no matter who you are. Because in one way, everything is consciousness. Neuroplasticity is a thing within this holographic reality. You can shift and change and grow. But there are ways in which to do that. And so, again, this entire channel is geared toward that. My repurposed, recycled, and I'll probably make some new spiritually based videos, not just neurodivergent and autistic, but the practices and principles and how to get to work on that deep interior journey. So take a look at all that I have to offer here on this channel. It's not too late to get started, but get started so that it's not too late in the moment when a pathological or disorderly version or expression of yourself arises. Solidarity. I knew it was coming. Solidarity. Support and solidarity. Support and solidarity is part of the purpose of my channel, but not just to reinforce and perpetuate the pain body story about it. Whatever it is. Support and solidarity and resonance and sharing of our experience to see that we're not alone, but then to find a way out of it, and then also to be able to determine what is just a very highly unique personality trait that I have that still might cause some challenge and a growing edge, how to work with it, but that's not the same as pathological and disorderly. This has been a fun one for me. I hope it's helpful for you. Thank you for being here. Namaste.